Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Blue Knight 7 with the Blue Knight Cast. And I'm going to interrupt our regularly scheduled programming. I have another episode on its way out at 1 o'clock. But I decided to go ahead and interject with episode 16.5 because I wanted to give an update from yesterday's episode talking about the possible Nintendo Direct this week. Now, because some more information has come in, and I'm at a point where I would want to revise some predictions. So, for a quick recap, over the weekend, some known leakers started weighing in, and including a user on Weibo, Ninspider, PH Brazil, and I even threw in Nash Weedle for kicks, that basically swirlings around of an extra Nintendo Direct this week. If you remember, in February we kept waiting for one that maybe focused on Switch 1 games, even though it wasn't guaranteed, though some leakers like Jeff Grubb were hinting at it. It didn't actually happen. But now, recently, we've had some more this week. As I say, there was a user on Weibo who said they thought it was this Wednesday, March 26th. Ninspider made a somewhat cryptic comment, basically hinting that there will be a Direct before Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd. Even Andy Robertson of Video Games Chronicle made a post on Twitter with a thinking emoji when other fellow ex-user Stealth40K said, I guess Nintendo made the right call not to distract from Switch 2 marketing with more Switch 1 marketing now that they've announced a Direct. And then you had Nash Weedle also make a weird post where he made some emojis that seemed to represent Fire Emblem with the number 2. Some people have been expecting a Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War remake, but that's Fire Emblem 4 to come for Switch 1. But he made a post that some people are reading as Fire Emblem 2. And even the Hollow Knight Silksong users got excited because there was some movement on the game's Steam page. Now, what does all that mean? It meant, as I said before, we could have a Switch 1 Direct. It's kind of hard to believe, but it kind of looks that way. Okay. Since then, we had a little more confirmation. I have a few of these posts to show you all, not all of them, but just for a quick aside. Necro Felipe made sort of a joke post on X almost. The Switch 2 will not be mentioned in this presentation. Y'all have seen that line 100 times recently. So I guess he's trying to say he knows that it's Switch 1 for sure, which makes sense. Also, Nate the Hate has weighed in. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people gave him a hard time in the lead up to that Switch 2 teaser reveal. To the point I can understand him being a little irritated and burned over the internet. But he did weigh in today to stop the constant questions. Yes, I've heard there is a Nintendo presentation this week. I believe it is on around Thursday, and it'll be a Direct, but I'm not 100% certain on the format at present. And, format, that's a question of whether this is a Nintendo Direct. Is this a Nintendo Direct Mini? Is this a partnership Direct Mini? What is this? So, understood. It could even be an indie world. Surely not. but it's a legit question. So with Nate the Hate weighing in on top of everybody else, you see, I'm a little biased to listening to Nate the Hate when it comes to leaks anyway. But now that he's weighed in, I'm just expecting a direct. I just am. I didn't think Nintendo would go about it this way. It's kind of exciting though, but I did not think they would go this route. Also, just sort of a follow-up from the Metroid episode I made. On Reddit, well, this is coming via Reddit, but YouTuber Extus1S, I'm probably doing this wrong. I know he's a Spanish-speaking YouTuber, I believe. Sorry if I'm saying anything wrong. I'm not very familiar with him. But he did make a video that other content creators are citing to, like Mike Odyssey. According to sources, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond won't appear at the upcoming Switch 2 Direct, with a grain of salt tag. And if you click the link, it takes you to his video, and I'll admit I couldn't understand a word, but that's what that is supposed to be. And just to color the background in a little more, Stealth40K made this post on X that I thought was interesting. And this is via Stealth, but coming from Tom Henderson, Windows Central. Switch 2 will have a 3-phase launch plan. First-party games will be the focus at launch. Third-party games will be prioritized for October to November. The third phase is the overall holiday period. There will be a hands-on media event next week. Okay. So, I don't think any of this is too big of a shock, like a media event right after they do this. I mean, that's not strange. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if you had sites like, say, Nintendo Life or IGN be invited to an event just to do it and, make their preview articles. The interesting part to me is where they say first-party games will be the focus at launch and third-party will be prioritized October, November. Sounds like they are trying to make sure they don't flood the zone at the very front and cause a game to not sell well, which I can actually appreciate, because if you have a launch with, say, Mario Kart 9, and insert any other racing game that might come out from a third party, Forza from Microsoft, let's say, that may hurt Forza, or, insert any other game. If you had a Metroid Prime 4 at launch, which I'm still not saying, I still think that could happen, you probably wouldn't want some other shooters at the same time. So that's what I think. And I don't think this means no third party at launch, because it says the focus. Like, might have Doom the Dark Ages at launch. I don't know. But you probably wouldn't want Doom the Dark Ages and Metroid Prime 4 on the same day. So maybe they really are going to try to scatter this out and be intelligent about how these releases are staggered. Like if Cyberpunk 2077 really does get a Switch port, I would hope it gets a little space. That kind of thing. And not be put next to, I don't know, a Xenoblade-like game if there is one. So maybe that's what we're seeing here. So it also tells me that first party is the focus at launch, I've seen some discussion about how much there really could be at launch. There's going to be more than one first-party game. We're clearly not getting more than just Mario Kart. So something is there. That's what I get out of that. And where that puts me is, if we really are having a Switch 1 Direct this week, what should we expect? And to me, a big elephant in the room at this moment is Metroid Prime 4. What should we expect? I feel like I have to rewrite that whole episode or parts of it, because if that, I don't know that leaker well. I don't know who trumps who, if that makes sense, or who should trump who. But I know Kiwi Talks has access to Retro Studios employees. So when he said Metroid Prime 4 will be in the April 2nd Switch 2 Direct, and it will be like the headliner, it will feel like the headliner, that's more what I wanted to believe, or felt right to believe. Because although it's going to be a Switch 1 game, I get that. I did feel like that's the one game that may get a special, like, cross-gen treatment for sure. Like, a Switch 1 physical, a Switch 2 physical, Switch 2 having better lighting, graphics, maybe the mouse controls for shooting. And I still kind of believe that, like, there's going to be something that helps it on Switch 2. It's just so close to the release. And I get that some people are like, why would you lead out with that when a single game hasn't broke 3 million in sales? I get it, but I feel like as much as they've invested in that game, they want to make it an evergreen for this gen. So, and they're clearly invested, because there's also been other rumors that Retro has already started work on Metroid Prime 5. Just keep the momentum, keep going. And I believe all that. But could it just be at the Switch 1 Direct? Could there have been a decision to just put it there with these other Switch 1 games just to give it its own proper Direct? That's also possible. Like, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. And I'll give you some scenario hypotheticals here in a minute, but I can't say it couldn't happen, because I feel like, last true Direct we've had, Metroid Prime 4 was the one more thing. And it was, we saw a little bit of the introductory levels, what I would say. It was probably within the first 30 minutes of the game, what we saw, or an hour at most. And it kind of set the scene and maybe the tone a little bit, but that's about it. We didn't see that much when you think about it. What we did see is, one, the gameplay looked like Metroid Prime, classic Metroid Prime, and two, we saw this rocky alien Federation base. We saw Silex. We saw some Metroids, or maybe Mocktroids is what they truly were. We saw space pirates. We saw a transition to a jungle level after that. Some sort of a jungle world. And that's really all we saw. But with that, of course, we saw this amazing graphics for a Switch 1 game. I mean, it looked beautiful. Looked gorgeous. And, it looks like, as expected, Retro's going to probably do the swan song for Switch 1 graphics. And probably Metroid Prime 4 is just going to be the Switch 1 swan song, period. So, sorry, Tears of the Kingdom, you came out in 2023, And so, because of that, it makes sense if there was a direct that was anchored around Metroid Prime 4 for Switch 1 before we go on to Switch 2. It's not crazy to me to be seeing that this week. It may not be what I wanted, but it's not crazy and it is believable. But in my mind, it's kind of one or the other. Either you see it this week or you just see it next week. I'm not going to be upset if I don't see it this week. That's sort of how I see that. And, it could just be, if we see it this week, it could just be that we get to see the game proper. And then on the Switch 2 Direct, even if they're saying it, even if it really isn't there, it wouldn't shock me if they showcase somehow what they're going to do to enhance Switch 1 games on Switch 2 and that be part of the group. So we got to find some things out still yet. We're not there yet. Okay, that out of the way. I'm just going to say either we see it at one or either we see it at one and maybe a brief mention in the Switch 2 Direct for back compatibility, or we don't see it and it just goes as I was predicting before, as in it's a showstopper on April 2nd. But for now, let's just to keep going, let's just assume it is the central whatever at this week's Direct. Switch 1 showcases the game for what it is on Switch 2. Let's just go with that. Alongside of that, I think this would be a good time to give its release date. And also to release Metroid Prime 2 if they're ever going to do it. After this, I'm just going to say I don't know. It'll come when it comes. I don't predict it anymore. But if there was a prediction, I'll just say this week Metroid Prime 2 or 3, if they're going to release them, we'll know something this week. Kind of a do or die for me. Along with that, I'm not going to say both, but we've talked so much about remasters for Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, let's do Wind Waker. I don't think they do both. I think they'll save Twilight Princess for another year, like year 2. But yeah, there you go. Legend of Zelda, Wind Waker, Switch 1, sometime this year. Twilight Princess, sometime after that, separate release, maybe beginning of 2026, just to keep tapering into 2026 for Switch 1. And obviously, everything I'm talking about right now will be a Switch 1 for this week's Direct. Fire Emblem, I think we'll just get an answer on that. Are we getting Genealogy of the Holy War? I don't put all my stock in Nash Weedle. If you take, there's some speculation as to what he actually meant. So I'm just going to say, yes, we're getting a Fire Emblem remake. I think it's more likely the Genealogy of the Holy War remake that's been talked about forever. It'll be at this Direct. There, I said it. The Kirby Planet Robobot remaster, Nate the Hate leaked. I think it'll be here too. I think if we get a Metroid Prime 2, we're going to get it as a shadow drop. And I'm just going to say Kirby Planet Robobot would be like the April game to be released. And the others I've said will follow suit. I don't know which month, just afterwards. Other releases, I don't know. There is a following for getting Yoshi's Woolly World released, and that would be on Goodfield to do it. They released their own game, Bakaru, last year. Could they have been working on a remaster to make it happen on Switch? Possible. I wouldn't rule out Woolly World. I saw some people on X posting about it. Not as a leak, but just as they want it. Put the idea in my head. Could be. But when you take what I just said, that's actually pretty solid for a direct mini, if that's what they're doing, or even for a general direct on first party. Because you would have Metroid Prime 4, Metroid Prime 2, maybe 3, Kirby Planet Robobot, Fire Emblem Remake, Genealogy of the Holy War, let's say. And I threw out a Yoshi game. That's pretty solid. I mean, even if it's mostly remakes, that's a solid lineup. Now, I do think the main reason we would have this direct this week is that Nintendo probably had some contractual obligations to third parties to put their trailer in a direct this fiscal year, which the end of this month would be the fiscal year for Nintendo. So it wouldn't shock me if we didn't see everything I just said and we got more third parties and it felt more like a partnership direct. Now, granted, a lot of the things I just spouted off would probably be made by like a third party studio or a second party studio. You know, Nintendo doesn't own Intelligent Systems when they make a Fire Emblem game. Nintendo doesn't own Good Feel if they made a Yoshi's Woolly World game remaster. I don't even think Nintendo owns HAL Labs technically. They may own some stock, but they don't own them. So it's just sort of a loose network that holds together pretty well and consistently makes games for Nintendo. And you could see some third parties for Switch 1 spouted in. I mean, there was talks that maybe Ubisoft would remaster some old games for Switch 1 as part of their effort to make continue support on Switch 2. I think there's some talk about getting EA and even Take-Two to make some more Switch 1 remasters of old games. So we could see those here. We could see some of that. Driver, just some different games like that. I think all of that's in play. Because we're getting seems like we're getting a direct that we weren't expecting. Or quit expecting in February. So I kind of gave you those predictions. Would Japanese devs come in and drop some more third parties for Switch 1? Yeah, it's possible. A real obvious one to me is Square Enix, because they are working on Dragon Quest HD 2D remakes for 1 and 2. And they've already said they're in development and they're following the Dragon Quest 3 remake we got last year. So why couldn't we see that this week? Just something of that. I don't think that's ridiculous. If Square really wanted to drop a bomb, give us the PC Android port they made of Chrono Trigger and just get Chrono Trigger on Switch once and for all. They acted like they were going to do something with the franchise for its anniversary. That'd be a good way to really kick it off. I know it's not the HD 2D remake or what some people would want, but it does get a game that feels a lot like the old Super NES game on Switch. And Namco, they spent the whole gen being a little behind on making Switch ports of games. What if they just had another Switch port ready? I don't know what game that would be at this point, but what if they did? maybe one of their Dark Souls entries. They had one remastered. What if we got Dark Souls 2? I don't think that's impossible. Capcom, I'm not sure what they would do right now, because most of what they've done is bigger, more squarely in the next gen, and anything they'd be working on right now, I feel like we'd be more apt to see on Switch 2. Just my opinion, I could be, someone else may have one. I figure they're going to come out more so for Switch 2. But those are things to think about. We've seen trailers for Daemon X Machina 2. I think that will be at one of these directs. I don't know if it's purely a Switch 2 game or not. But it could be a Switch 1 game. We've known about it for a while. It could be a Switch 1 game, and it could be in this direct from Marvelous. There's a lot of possibilities here. You had a lot of possibilities with the Switch 2 direct, and now we got like an extra however many minutes of airtime just for Switch 1, because apparently they're getting their own direct now. That's exciting. And I know it's not the next gen, but if you have a Switch 1 and you don't think you're going to be able to afford a Switch 2 for a while, or for some reason you don't think you'll be able to get a Switch 2 for a while, you just found out you're getting some more games for your Switch 1. Or if you just had bought your Switch 1 later in the life cycle of the console and you're not quite ready to be rid of it just yet, you're getting more games. This is good news. This is actually pro-consumer in a way. This is good news. And I'm going to say praise to Nintendo for keeping this going. So I'm going to cut off this episode with this. I just wanted to update on what's going on. If you've got this far, thank you for listening. Again, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'm just trying to grow this podcast. I'm trying to be reliable on the content coming out every week. Any help would be appreciated on that. And thank you for listening, and have a good day.